A reading from Luke chapter 14, verses 7 through 24. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, "Give this person your place." And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and for all who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or sisters or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." One of the dinner guests, on hearing this, said to him, "Blessed is anyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Then Jesus said to him, "Someone gave a great dinner and invited many. At the time of the dinner, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is ready now.' But they, all alike, began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a piece of land, and I must go out and see it. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I am going to try them out. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I have just been married, and therefore I cannot come.' So the slave returned and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and said to his slave, 'Go out at once into the streets and the lanes of the town, and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' And the slave said, 'Sir, what you ordered has been done, and there is still room.' Then the master said to the slave, 'Go out into the roads and the lanes and compel people to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited will taste my dinner.'" Thus ends the reading.
Imagine that you're hosting a dinner party, and you can invite any 6 people, from the past or present, dead or alive. Who would make your guest list? Would you consider your favorite novelist or poet, a famous rock star or Hollywood celebrity, a distinguished political or spiritual leader, or a celebrated scientist or artist from the past? What about your BFF or your partner, a revered ancestor, parent, or sibling? We can all think of a handful of people, likely, whom we'd love to invite to our dinner party. And we can doubtless think of others that we would never consider inviting to such an occasion. An adversary who gets under our skin, a personal nemesis who rubs us the wrong way, an outspoken neighbor, a crazy uncle, an ex-spouse or boss. People about whom we might say, "She's not ever welcome to sit at my table," or "He would never be allowed to step 1 foot in my house." According to one unscientific poll, the most common names that make people's imaginary guest lists include the likes of Albert Einstein, Abraham Lincoln, Rosa Parks, Charles Darwin, Joan of Arc, and Jesus. A pretty distinguished group of visionaries and influencers and trailblazers, to be sure. But all those serious, big-brained people sitting around one table, that could make for a really long night. I'd personally be inclined to add an extra chair at the table for Robin Williams, just to lighten the mood and laugh a little. Jesus was invited to a dinner party one evening, It was the kind of dinner party that perhaps you have attended at some point in your life. The kind where upon your arrival you immediately think to yourself, this is going to be a really long night. Maybe it's a combination of several odd things happening all at once. Like how the guest sitting to your left has been nervously laughing way too loud all night about everything, even things that aren't meant to be funny. And how that proud guest near the head of the table won't stop bragging about his company's Q4 sales results, even though no one seems to be remotely interested, while the guest at the other end of the table hasn't actually spoken a single word all night. And how the guest sitting directly across from you keeps rattling on and on about the latest political news headline he read about on his social media feed on his way to the party. And how the dinner host can't stop nervously clearing his throat and asking if anybody needs more wine. Jesus was attending that kind of party one night. It was held at the house of one of the top leaders, the Pharisees. And Luke says that, quote, all the guests had their eyes on him, watching his every move. Well, Jesus apparently had not been invited to this party for the food or fellowship, but instead to be sized up and scrutinized and judged by the religious and ideological purists of his day. Is Jesus one of us? Does he think like us and believe like us? Does he belong with us? What plays out at the dinner party that night is a human phenomenon we call social sorting. It's a segregation mechanism as old as humanity itself, and it's at the heart of so much of our political polarization in America today. Social sorting refers to the complex ways we put others and ourselves into these convenient, often narrowly defined social and religious and political categories, or buckets, if you will, that we use then to describe our primary identity and to determine how we're supposed to behave and think in the world. And these categories are often defined in very binary, either-or terms, like male, female, gay, straight, liberal, conservative, Protestant, Catholic, Democrat, Republican, evangelical, progressive, Broncos fans, Chiefs fans, Coke drinkers, Pepsi drinkers. We all participate in social sorting. It's how we find acceptance and belonging. It's also how we resolve a lot of internal conflict and avoid ambiguity in life. It works something like this. We identify a team we want to be a part of. We join it. We learn how everyone on the team is supposed to think and behave, and we conform. The team rewards us for our loyalty and conformity by reinforcing our sense of belonging and assuring us that we aren't alone in this world, as long, of course, as we're a team player. We're given a team jersey for our membership, and we wear it then in all of our social circles and endeavors. And our jersey communicates to others who we are and who our people are and how we think and what we stand for and what and who we stand against. Social sorting isn't inherently bad. Belonging is one of our deepest human needs. It's indispensable to our survival and well-being. When we join a team committed to human flourishing, committed to the common good or to compassion and justice, the world is a better place, and so are we. The problem today is that when it comes to our political teams, we're caught up in this tug toward the fringes. And this tug toward the fringes is happening on both sides of the aisle. And it's emptying out the middle ground where most Americans likely prefer to stay, but are afraid they'll be alone there. And this tug toward the fringes, it implies that if we want to be on a team, we're given no alternative but to subordinate our personal identity and unquestionably adopt our team's identity. even the parts of that team that conflict with our values or conscience. To be a good player, we're then forced to take sides and positions with hard, inflexible boundaries. And to assuage our conscience and justify our team's inherent goodness, we have to compare our party's best to the other party's worst, and then universally demonize members of the opposing side. Social sorting, being on a team, it creates a world of problems, even as we assume that it will resolve a lot of inner conflict. When we join a political team, suddenly there are no questions about who we're supposed to vote for or how we should vote on a given issue. And there are no questions about who the enemy or opposition is or which party is to blame for all of society's problems. But at what cost to us or to those we love? When we join a religious team that enforces black and white absolutes, suddenly there are no questions about what we're supposed to believe about this doctrine or that, or who's saved and who's condemned, or how we're supposed to resolve this or that personal moral dilemma. But again, at what cost to us or to those we love, especially when life isn't always black and white? And what happens when we join Team America or any other national team for that matter, and the demand for unquestioned allegiance costs us the freedom to question policies, to criticize authorities, to voice dissent, and we're then branded as unpatriotic or extremists or un-American? Putting on any of these jerseys will define our identity. It will ascribe us certain roles. It will give us a sense of belonging in exchange for fulfilling those roles. To fit in, we're asked to adopt this identity of the team, to conform to its ideology, its theology, its philosophy or worldview, and to think and then believe and act like everyone else on the team. And as a reward for our allegiance, we may feel safe, accepted, and validated. This is why we love our team jerseys, and we wear them with great pride. But what happens when we outgrow them, or they become too confining or restricting? Or when they no longer encapsulate who we really are, or who we desire to become? Or when they break their promises, or come to represent values or purposes that conflict with our conscience or our sense of what's true or right or good? It's then that we no longer feel at home in them or like we belong to any team. I experienced this at a very personal and professional level in 2019 when our denomination passed legislation to punish and restrict LGBTQ persons in the church. Until that legislation was finally dismantled in 2024, I found myself wearing a jersey that seemed to contradict everything I believed in. I know more and more people today who have belonged to one political party or the other for years, but who have become disillusioned by their party's values or ideology. Their jersey just doesn't fit them anymore. I know many who have shed the jersey of evangelicalism or some other religious tradition after experiencing spiritual or emotional or even physical trauma. And their jersey it doesn't fit them anymore. But it's hard to take off the jersey when it has defined our identity and promised us belonging. It takes courage to remove it. That's the insidious power of social sorting. And Jesus, he sees the damage it has done at the dinner party that he attends this day. The host and all the guests want to know, Jesus, do you believe like us? Do you think like us and act like us? Are you worthy of wearing our jersey? Do you want to belong, Jesus? Only Jesus looks around the table at all these people wearing the same jersey, and and he sees how miserable they are, all jockeying for the best seats, pretending to be someone they're not, just to fit in. They're all so busy trying to prove they're worthy of the jersey that they've forgotten who they really are. They're not allowed to be themselves at that table. They have a seat at the table, but they are malnourished of love and acceptance. That's when Jesus tells them a parable about a man who planned a dinner party and invited all these guests who, shockingly, declined the invitation. They each had really lame excuses for not being able to attend. I have to work late, said one. I've got some family issues at home, said another. Look, I need to bathe my cat tonight. In the end, I think it all came down to the fact that they had already chosen their jerseys, and they were afraid of what it might mean to take it off. Instead of canceling that dinner party, in the story, the man orders his servants to go into the city streets and alleys and invite people who probably hadn't ever attended a swanky dinner party. All these misfits, homeless, down and outs and cast-offs, people who've never worn a jersey at all because the world wouldn't give them one. And not surprisingly, they all accepted the invitation. And when they sat down at the host's table, they weren't handed a jersey in exchange for acceptance or love. They didn't need a jersey to belong at that table. They could just be themselves in each other's presence. And because there were still some empty seats at that table, the host sent his servants out again to find more people. Go to the country roads, he says. Whoever you find, drag them in. I want my house full. The man doesn't specify the kind of people he wants at his table because there are no jersey prerequisites. He didn't ask for only those who espoused a particular ideology or political viewpoint, or those who had the same religious beliefs as him, or those who were considered morally worthy, or even those who would be deferential or overly reverential out of fear of not fitting in. Just go find people, says the host. Drag them in if you have to. I want a full house. It's what Jesus does. He invites us to his table, tells us to leave our jerseys outside. He draws the circle of belonging so wide that our social categories no longer mean anything. As the poet Rumi reminds us, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. The parable suggests that a community of unconditional belonging is God's dream come true. A community without jerseys where the gathered sit at a table and are safe and loved. This table, according to Jesus, is the only place in the world where all those identity boundaries that divide the human family, like race, religion, politics, geography, gender, sexual orientation, wealth, or poverty, where they are all transcended so that belonging can happen. Our separateness is an illusion. Our jerseys are a disguise. Our team identities are a mirage that keeps us from belonging to one another. And the more we cling to our jerseys, the more we suffer from a malnourishment of the soul that quietly destroys us. Jesus wants everybody at the table, but not everybody wants to be there. And not everybody wants everybody else to be there. In the great novel To Kill a Mockingbird, it's the first week of school for Scout Finch. Her first grade teacher, Miss Caroline, is also new. At lunchtime, Miss Caroline notices that one little boy, Walter Cunningham, has no lunch. She offers to lend him 25 cents to buy his lunch. Walter refuses. Miss Caroline doesn't understand, so Scout explains that Walter doesn't have a lunch because he's a Cunningham. And the Cunninghams are so poor they can't afford lunch and couldn't afford to pay back that 25 cents. Later, Scout's brother Jem invites Walter to come home with the two of them for lunch. Calpurnia, the beloved housekeeper and cook, sets another place at the table. The children and Atticus sit down to eat. Walter, the boy, asks if there's any molasses in the house. And Calpurnia brings the syrup pitcher, and Walter immediately pours molasses on his vegetables and on his meat. And Scout asks Walter, "What the Sam Hill are you doing?" But Atticus shakes his head at Scout. And Scout says, but he's gone and drowned his dinner in syrup. He's poured it all over. Calpurnia calls Scout to the kitchen. She whispers, "There's some folks who don't eat like us, but you ain't called on to contradict them at the table when they don't. That boy's your company," she says, and if he wants to eat up the tablecloth, you let him, you hear? Scout says he ain't company, he's a Cunningham. Cal says, "Hush your mouth. Don't matter who they are. Anybody sets foot in this house is your company. And don't you let me catch you remarking on their ways like you was so high and mighty. If you can't act fit to eat at the table, you can just sit here and eat in the kitchen." There are no jerseys at the table of belonging, but it's hard not to see people in them, especially when the jerseys don't match ours, especially in our polarized world where all we see are jerseys and where we refuse to sit at the table with those whose jerseys are different from ours. If you struggle to see people beyond the jerseys they wear, if you struggle to engage with people on the other team, will you make two commitments to yourself? First, commit to engaging difference with curiosity. Never, ever prioritize being right over being in relationship. Stay curious. Instead of making harsh judgments, ask honest questions. Remain open to new information by asking, what life experiences have shaped your views? Or what do you hope others will understand about you? Or what do you think others misunderstand about you or your views? Or what can I learn about you that I may not understand? Second, avoid ambiguity and half-truths in speaking about yourself. Never feel like you must nuance the truth about what's most important to you, or your principles, or your own moral commitments. In difficult conversations that feel like a tug toward the fringes, self-report your feelings, your underlying values whenever possible. Speak openly and freely about yourself. These are the life experiences that have shaped my views. This is what I hope others will understand about me. This is what others often misunderstand about me or my views. This is what I hope you can learn from me, that you may not understand. At the end of the day, the politics of Jesus are not the politics of power or purity, but the politics of the table. A table where no one wears a jersey, no one is turned away, and everyone has a seat. In a world tugged toward its fringes, Jesus calls us to encounter one another at the center, where curiosity replaces judgment and humility outshines certainty, and love is the only credential we need to belong. So take off the jersey, pull up a chair, make room for someone who's not yet at the table, because that's where the kingdom begins. One shared meal, one open heart, one widened circle at a time. Today's takeaways: the kingdom has no dress code. Our separateness is an illusion. A full table is God's dream.